1981, my dear brothers and sisters. Jim Castle, a 45-year-old successful finance consultant for a top firm, was tired and weary after a week of intense work, and he had boarded a flight from Cincinnati in Ohio. It was a noisy flight, but he had the fortune of getting early into his seat and was hoping for a quiet journey that he could catch a few winks of sleep. And in the midst of the ruckus of people finding their seats, after a while, there was a hush and an unusual quiet in the plane. And he opened his eyes and he looked ahead, and coming down the aisle were two religious sisters. And the first one was immediately recognizable. Both of them wore the traditional white sari with the blue border. And the one in front, he recognized immediately as the renowned, world-famous Mother Teresa of Calcutta, whose face he had only seen on Time magazine. And she and her companion sister were slowly walking down the aisle. And to his amazement, they both stopped near him, looked up, and gently said, "Our seats are next to yours." And he immediately got up and they took their seats and buckled themselves, and he himself buckled himself. And as the plane began to taxi, they took out their rosary beads and they began to pray. Jim noticed the rosary beads in the hand of Mother Teresa. They were rather large, and every bead had a different color. And after a while, when he asked her why different colors, she said, "At every prayer of the Hail Mary, I pray for the poor in all the countries I know where there are so many poor." Once airborne, the sisters continued to pray their rosary. Jim was quiet, amazed at the two of them. After a while, when they finished praying their rosary, Mother Teresa turned to Jim and looked him in the eyes, and he felt something within him. There was an inner calm and an inner peace he couldn't put words to. And she said to him, "Young man, do you pray the rosary?" He was flustered and he said, I don't know when I last prayed the rosary." And then she said, "Here, take these beads and keep them for yourself and pray the rosary." He gratefully accepted the beads and held them clutched in his hands. After the flight, as he made his way out and collected his bags and met his wife Ruth, who was waiting for him, and she gave him a big hug and a kiss. And then she saw the rosary beads still clutched in his hands, and she said, "What's with that?" And he shared what had happened on the flight. And he said to her, "I was truly in the presence of a daughter of God, someone who was just filled with God, and I sensed it." 9 months later, their very dear friend took very seriously ill with cancer, and she had tumors in her uterus and needed surgery. Jim and his wife Ruth went over to visit their friend, who was very nervous. And he gave her the rosary beads and he said, "Hold on to them and pray the rosary." Fascinatingly, a couple months later, their friend made a miraculous recovery. The doctors couldn't explain how the tumors vanished and there was no malignancy. She returned the rosary beads to Jim and she said, "Pass this on. We don't know who will need this. Pray the rosary." Not long after that, Jim's own sister-in-law, after a severe divorce, was very depressed. And Jim and his wife sat with her and gave her the rosary, and she put the rosary in a velvet bag and kept her next to her bed. And every night she'd hold on to the rosary beads and pray the rosary, struggling with her depression, as somehow in her loneliness she found peace. And later, when things became easier for her, she returned the rosary beads, and so started a long process. Anyone in need, Jim would give the rosary beads and invite them to pray the rosary and say to them, "When you have received what you've asked for, return back so that I could share it with so many others." Jim did something else with his life. He realized on that flight that Mother Teresa, in his dialogue with her, carried just one little cloth bag with a wooden handle. And in that little bag was all her world's possessions. She owned nothing else. He realized an important lesson. As he began to disinvest, as he began to get rid from his own life all the clutter, possessions, acquirements, and he realized all of this doesn't matter. What matters truly is that we share God's love and tenderness. That's all that matters. The gospel today speaks of, "You shall know them by their fruits." We all know Mother Teresa, not for her erudite speeches and her writings, but we know her for the fruit that has been born because of her faith in God, her love for God, her ability to see Jesus in the sick, the despised, the abandoned, the leper, and bringing them care, tenderness, and mercy. Her acts of tenderness were a spontaneous gesture that flowed from her heart. She touched not just the wounded physically, but she touched the wounded and those longing for a new direction in life, like Jim. And having experienced that touch of God through Mother Teresa, fruit was born in their lives, like Jim. And Jim now began like a tree, having been touched by the mercy and grace of God through Mother Teresa, began to bear fruit through his life. How true it is. So many of us falsely think that perhaps we should be known by the books we write, the speeches we give, the houses we acquire, the bank balances we build up, by property we show around. But not really. You shall know them by their fruits. We'd rather be known by every simple gesture of warmth, of tenderness, of kindness. Jim realized that, and his life bore fruit. My prayer for myself in this novena is that our Blessed Mother of Perpetual Help, who bore the supreme fruit of Jesus and offered him to the world, might intercede for all of us, and for me especially, that may I not be known by what I write or what I speak or the talks I give. These are but fleeting and passing. May I rather be known by the kindness, the gentleness, the mercy, the compassion that flows through my words and through my little gestures to whomsoever is in need. We turn to our Mother, seek her grace and intercession as we come into this celebration, that we might truly be known by the fruit we bear. Amen.